It has always amazed me the profound change California experienced between 1840 and 1860. In 1840, the Mexican and European population was between 8 and 14,000 people. The Native American population was between 150 and 300,000. California was part of Mexico. The Mexican American War would begin in 1846. After their loss in 1848, Mexico seceded to the United States. California, Texas, New Mexico, Utah, Nevada, and Arizona for $15 million. Amazing when you realize gold would be discovered in 1848. By the 1860s, the Native American population had been decimated by the gold rush. There were over 400,000 non-native and only about 30,000 indigenous people left. Their hunting grounds had been overrun. Starvation, disease, and the systematic killing by organization groups like the Placer Blades had decimated the population. In this video, I'm going to highlight the history of the Johnson Ranch, which was on the north side of the Bear River near what is now present-day Wheatland. The Sierra Nevadas and foothills were inhabited by the Nisenan, Maidu, and Miwok tribes for tens of thousands of years. They used fire to alter the environment along the Bear River. In a Spanish account, it was said a rider could gallop full speed on a horse along the river without obstruction. The water was clean. Game, fish, acorns, berries, and other edible plants were plentiful. California was known by the Hudson Bay trappers. The area was also explored by Kit Carson and John Fremont in 1843 and 44. They camped along the Bear River near what would become Johnson Ranch. In December of 1844, Pablo Gutierrez was awarded 22,000-acre Mexican land grant north of the Bear River. It was known as Rancho de Pablo. The grant included most of what would become Wheatland. Gutierrez had worked for John Sutter. While exploring his property, Gutierrez had discovered the Bear River contained traces of gold. He told his friend John Bidwell of Chico, who was fluent in Spanish, he was going to Sutter's Fort to get a batee. Bidwell was confused, not knowing what a batee was. Only later he realized Medeiros was talking about a gold pan. Throughout the process of getting the land grant, there had been political unrest in California. A revolution was forming to oust the Mexican governor. In order to maintain Mexican control, he had accelerated land grants in Alta California to encourage Mexican settlement. When Gutierrez arrived at Sutter's Fort, the Bear Flag Revolt had begun. California was declaring independence from Mexico. John Sutter asked Gutierrez to carry dispatches to the governor in Monterey, stating they were organizing and preparing to join him in the uprising. Gutierrez returned to Sutter's Fort and was again sent to tell the governor that they were on the march to join him in Monterey. The Bear Flag Revolt was a short-lived rebellion by American settlers in California against Mexican rule in 1846. They declared California an autonomous nation and an independent republic and raised a flag with a bear and a star in Sonoma. The revolt only lasted a month before the U.S. Navy seized Monterey and officially claimed California for the United States. Unfortunately for Pablo Gutierrez, the second trip to Monterey, he was taken prisoner with the dispatches and was hanged somewhere near the present town of Gilroy. Ironically, California gold discovery might have been credited to Pablo Gutierrez instead of James Marshall in 1848. John Sutter was the executor of Pablo Gutierrez's estate. Sutter put the estate up for auction in 1845. The property was purchased by William Johnson and his partner Sebastian Kaiser for $150. William Johnson was a sailor out of Boston. He had captained several trips from San Francisco to the Sandwich Islands, later to be known as Hawaii. His partner, Sebastian Kaiser, was born in Austria, and he had been a trapper and accompanied Sutter in 1838 from Missouri through Mexico to California. First wagon train to cross Immigrant Pass west of Truckee was the Stevens Townsend Murphy Party in 1844 with 40 wagons. They followed a path from Iowa and crossed the Sierras at what would become Donner Pass. They arrived at Johnson Ranch before proceeding to Sutter's Fort. The party started off with 50 persons and arrived at Sutter's Fort with 52, there being 2 children born on the trail. They crossed a year before John Fremont's third expedition to California, 2 years before the Donner Party, before the Mexican-American War, and before the discovery of gold in 1848. Of course, when they crossed the pass, there was no improvements as seen in this video. They dismantled their wagons and carried them piece by piece up the mountain with ropes. Seeing a need for accommodations and supplies for the immigrant, in 1846, Johnson and Kaiser built an adobe house and a corral. Johnson Ranch became the end of the trail for the immigrants over the Sierras before they would proceed on to Sutter's Forts or other destinations. It was mentioned in many pioneer diaries. In 1846, a wagon train containing the Donner and Reed Party departed Independence, Missouri. The journey west usually took between 4 and 6 weeks. Unfortunately, they tried an unproven route known as the Hastings Cutoff. The party was delayed over a month. By early November, the immigrants finally reached the Sierra Nevada at Donner Lake. They were trapped by a heavy snowfall. This was an especially large amount of snow that year, probably what would now be known as a Pineapple Express. The base of the Donner Memorial is the height of the snow that year. Years later, parts of the bodies would be gathered and burnt at the foot of the memorial. The native sons of the Golden West are responsible for building and dedicating this memorial. If you've never read any of the books about the Donner Party, you can never imagine how bad it became. Trapped without food, they killed their last oxen in December. Those trapped at Truckee Meadows would eventually turn to cannibalism to survive. December 16, 1846, a group of 17, known as the Forlorn Hope, set off on snowshoes to get help. The rescue party did not realize how difficult it would be to cross the Sierras. They lost their way, and instead of following the Bear River, they followed the American River Canyon, which was a far more difficult route. They also turned to cannibalism. They first ate several of the members of the party who had died. Their 2 Miwok guides did not like the way the group was looking at them and slipped away in the night. They would be hunted down, killed, and also eaten. History's brutal. The survivors were in desperate condition. Their shoes were destroyed. They were starving and suffering from snow blindness. On January 18th, 1847, the rescue party reached an Indian camp near Johnson Ranch. When they staggered into the Indian camp, the tribe members fled in fear. William Eddy gave an Indian a pouch of tobacco to carry him on to Johnson Ranch. Settlers at the ranch were shocked by the emancipated man. It had taken 33 days for them to cross the Sierras. They followed the bloody footprints to find the other survivors. Subsequent rescue parties would muster at Johnson Ranch before crossing the Sierras to help those trapped at Donner Lake. The first relief party arrived in the middle of February 1847, almost 4 months after the wagon train had been trapped. Of the 87 members of the party, only 48 would survive. One of the Donner Party survivors was a young Mary Murphy. Johnson took an interest in the young girl and asked her to marry him. Evidently, Johnson was a drunk and not a very good husband, and she soon divorced him. Mary would later marry Charles Cavalt, a large landowner in Yuba County. He would name Marysville in her honor. Johnson Ranch was the end of the trail for many immigrants. If there had been any reluctance for immigration to come to California after the Donner Party tragedy, their doubts would soon be forgotten when gold was discovered in 1848. As time went by, Johnson Ranch became less and less critical. Rogers' Union Shed would be built in 1855 in Sheridan. Regular stagecoaches went from Sutter's Fort to the mining communities in Grass Valley and the foothills. Several floods along the Bear River destroyed whatever was left of the ranch. In 1849, Johnson sold his share of the ranch and moved to Hawaii. His partner, Sebastian Kaiser, also sold his interest in the ranch. He would operate a ferry on the Cosumnes River. Unfortunately, he drowned in 1850. Nothing remains of the original Johnson Ranch adobe and corral. I found an interesting article in a 1986 copy of Overland magazine about Johnson Ranch. Jack and Richard Steed used metal detectors to find the location of the ranch. They unearthed artifacts and found the location of the well. In 2023, historian Bill Holmes led a tour to mark the Johnson Ranch adobe house and crossing. The site is on private land and not accessible to the public. I find it ironic that something as historically significant as Johnson Ranch, with it being so close to us, is not more well known. Well, I hope you've enjoyed my video. If you'd like to see more, go on YouTube and search for Dave Lightfoot.